קרן, אני לא רואה קמח מצה וגם לא מצות. זה מה שנשאר. אני מצלם לך ותעשי מזה...
That's what it sounded like 2 days ago at the Loblaws-owned Atlantic Superstore on Joseph Howe Drive in Halifax. The voice belongs to the executive director of the Atlantic Jewish Council, Yoram Abisror. He was in the store to try to help local Jewish residents source Passover matzah. He couldn't find any. It was in the back. There were 5 boxes of plain matzah and 16 boxes of egg matzah. It was worse across town at the Sobeys on Queen Street in Halifax. They had 1 box of egg matzah, and that's it. So with just days to go before Passover, Abisror and the rabbi of the city's main Orthodox synagogue, Rabbi Kerzner, knew they had a serious problem. Every year, the Jewish community in Halifax has worked closely with the managers of the 2 main stores where most of the community lives. Kosher groceries and meat orders are placed months in advance, but Jewish officials say every year the shipments either come in late or they come in half the size of what was ordered, and even when the food does arrive, sometimes it's not kosher for Passover for Ashkenazi Jews who don't eat rice and beans or other forms of legumes that Sephardic Jews do. And while Jewish leaders acknowledge that not everybody in the city keeps strictly kosher, they worried that this year people wouldn't be able to at least fulfill the obligation of eating matzah at the Passover Seders.
I've been here for a number of years, and over the years, the supply seems to be getting shorter and shorter and less predictable. Some of that had to do with COVID, but in general, the supply chain is not working so well for us on the outer limits of the Jewish communities in Canada.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Thursday, March the 30th, 2023. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, sponsored by Metropia. It's been a challenging year for Jews in many parts of the Atlantic region. Just last fall, they had to celebrate the high holidays without power, in the cold and dark, after post-tropical storm Fiona downed trees, caused widespread damage, and spoiled freezers full of hard-to-get kosher food. When Rabbi Kerzner moved to Halifax from Toronto 7 years ago to take the job at the city's Orthodox congregation on Oxford Street, he knew he would be dealing with the challenges facing Jews who live in smaller communities. But this Passover, for the first time, he felt they had to send out an emergency note to the community because there was no more matzah in Halifax, and he's had to go to extraordinary lengths this week to try to find some. And so coming up, Rabbi Kerzner and Yoram Abisror will be here to tell us why they went public with their problems right after this message.
During World War II, the Nazis began a little-known program of extermination for their own children. In Peter Clennott's new mystery thriller, The Unwanted, 14-year-old Hannah Ziegler is being driven by her grandfather and her psychiatrist to a euthanasia center. 16-year-old Silke Hartenstein graces the cover of Nazi propaganda magazines. Avi Kreisler is a Munich police detective rounded up for Dachau. And a patrician father hopes his son David McAuliffe will be elected the first Catholic president of the United States. In The Unwanted, in the aftermath of war, revenge brings these 4 people together in ways unimaginable. The Unwanted. Do not skip to the last page. Find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
And I'm joined now by Rabbi Kerzner from the Beth Israel Synagogue and by Yoram Abisror from the offices of the Atlantic Jewish Council.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I guess we should start off with what's the latest situation on how difficult it's been for your community to access matzah and some staples for this year. Anyone can start.
There's less Pesach food available, and there's less matzah, and it sometimes doesn't come when they expect it. So the Sobeys or the Superstore will order it months in advance. They're waiting, and it only comes sometimes 2 weeks late, sometimes 3 weeks late, and then when it does come, they don't get what they ordered. So this is something which continuously happens here, and it seems to be getting worse.
Yoram, did you want to jump in?
I just came here from Montreal. I mean, coming from Montreal and seeing what we have in Montreal just before Passover in the different supermarkets compared to what we have here. It's not only that we're lacking stuff, it's the quantity, the stuff itself. Some of the things don't come here at all.
So this speaks to the problem that I think is that it's not that they're being mean about it or they're anti-Semitic. That has nothing to do with it. It's more that they don't know, or there's problems getting it here that hurts the community?
I'd like to address that. I've met numerous times with the grocery manager, the general manager in whether the Sobeys or the Superstore. They have very good intentions. And because we have people calling them sometimes every day for weeks at a time, they have put in their orders very early. So the local managers are there to try to help us, and it's to their benefit to help the community, both as to be good to the community and to economically for them to get business. But that doesn't mean back where in the system that they're necessarily responding appropriately, and the orders just don't come. I'm not sure if it's just because of inefficiencies in the system or because by the time the food gets to Halifax, it's stopped off in Toronto and Montreal, and we don't end up getting anything that's left.
Or perhaps this year is maybe more difficult because of supply chain issues? What are they telling you?
Supply chains and delivery, I think, is part of the problem, but it's been a problem even before COVID. It depends on the year. Managers also change. So again, in their defense, a manager who comes from Pictou, Nova Scotia, is not necessarily that familiar with the Jewish community or kosher needs. Nobody could read the small little Hebrew letters on Israeli products saying Lo Kolel Pesach, Kosher LePesach, Kitniot, only for Svardim. There's no way that they could know these things without a lot of training.
They could maybe cooperate with us a bit better before the holidays, and maybe even show us some products or ask us about certain products, and we would be more than happy to participate in such a meeting. But they just do what they can, and as the rabbi said, some of the stuff somehow doesn't come here. And maybe it's in Montreal, maybe it's in Toronto, maybe it's in somewhere, but it's not here.
So what difficulties does this pose for people at this moment?
So the difficulties that we find is that we have to plan and think what would happen all the time if we won't have enough. And I'm afraid to say that what would happen if some people will come before Passover and they won't have products. They won't have matzahs for the Seder. I went over the weekend on Sunday, and I bought some emergency packs and I put them in my office just in case someone will, the day before Passover, it will be completely empty. The rabbi was very kind, and he went to Montreal. We made deliveries. We put announcements. He drove to Montreal. We did everything that we could. I would like to avoid this. We'll have to find a way to avoid those kind of things.
Rabbi, he mentioned that you went to extraordinary lengths. This is something that a smaller Jewish community has to deal with months in advance. I even read somewhere the other day that in Nepal and Thailand, the Chabad synagogues, they start right after Rosh Hashanah, they start ordering for their Pesach Seders because they make for thousands of tourists and Israeli backpackers, right? But in smaller communities, that's what you have to do. So what else is the situation maybe in Moncton or in PEI, or what else do you hear?
I heard about people that buy on Amazon as well. So, but this is just like a pack of $5 becomes $20 with the delivery, and you hope that it will come in the right time. The other thing is, in Moncton, I know that there is a small store, and also in Fredericton. So and the people from St. John, they would go there, and maybe they will they make their orders, and they would get. But Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, they have to come over here to Halifax. They have to, some friends, family would ship to them, or if they go for the holidays to their family, they would take with them. They don't have the supplies. So in Moncton, there is something that there's a store. Even the rabbi was telling me about maybe going to Moncton and buying from Moncton because it's a bigger store. But here we have two big stores and unfortunately not enough supply.
And inflation, we know now, is hurting people all over the world, including for Passover groceries. I know in the bigger cities, people are losing their minds about how expensive everything is, even here. But what about the meat? Kosher meat, is that not an issue for the Maritimes? Because
in Halifax, the Sobeys here downtown does have always a supply of kosher meat. They get it from Shefa in Toronto. Again, they have orders, so there are times when there's low, there's times when there's not enough, and then there's times, maybe abundance, and they have to balance also supply and demand. it's not always easy for them to know what the supply and demand is, and they don't necessarily even know the right cuts that are more popular. But right now, for example, I went there last night. There's a supply of meat, not that much chicken left. And this is what happens from time to time. You'll find certain things, you might want thighs, you might want polkas, you might want breast. You don't have the choice you have when you go into Toronto or Montreal, into any store, any supermarket.
The Atlantic Jewish Council on 3 or 4 days ago sent out an email, a blast, which we heard about. That's why I'm talking to you about that. You are selling it yourself out of the synagogue and you're taking orders. Rabbi, tell me what was the reason that you made that decision, both of you, to go public with this, and then what were the maybe benefits that actually happened because of that?
Well, on last Friday, I went into both Sobeys and Superstore. Sobeys had no matzah left, and Superstore had not yet gotten their order. So there was literally no matzahs in town. There was gluten-free matzah-style squares, which are not matzah. And I said, there's a lot of people who didn't buy in advance and go in the last week. So I said, we probably have to do something. So there's a store in Montreal where I ordered from. They're sending through, they're delivering the next couple days, about 150 pounds of matzah or something like that. We just decided, you have to get the supplies one way or the other.
Rabbi, did you sell everything that you ordered, or
oh no, it's still
put it the other way around?
It didn't come. I asked people to order. I put in the order. It will be here in a few days. And we'll sit here distributing it to the people who come. We'll make do. Probably Sunday afternoon we'll have everyone pick up their matzah.
You were pleasantly surprised at how many people responded.
Right. I'm only familiar with the people I meet in the shul here, and also the conservative shul, Chabad. And over the years you meet a lot of people. And I realize there's a lot more Jews here. Comes Pesach time, they want some matzah. They might not have even bought if they didn't get the email from the AJC. The same thing is true Hanukkah time. You get a lot of people buying, candles. We have a gift shop. Sometimes I'm surprised at everyone who comes out of the woodwork, literally. And there's a lot of new families here in Halifax that seem to be moving in. Mostly, I think, from Israel. Yoram could speak to this, and there's some that are coming from Toronto, refugees from Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, who are finding that the lifestyle here is calmer, it's less expensive, and it's a nicer, gentler society.
I don't know about less expensive, but it's okay.
Less expensive housing, not food.
It's fair to say that there's a growing community, mostly from Israel. Israel is that either first language Hebrew or first language Russian that went through Israel, and they are coming here because of all kinds of reasons. And I meet a lot of them. And when you grow up in Israel, you don't have a problem with your identity. You go to the supermarket before Passover and you get the matzahs and the chocolate and the whole thing for the things for the kids and what we all liked and grew up with. And they want to continue and have this experience here as well.
Rabbi, is there some kind of dispensation? Let's say you're in a situation where they don't have what they need for 8 days or 7 days.
Halachically, you could always eat vegetables, potatoes, eggs. It's not like you'll starve to death. But the reason we felt it was necessary to put out a special order for matzah is because matzah is the one thing that you have a mitzvah to eat on the night of the Seder, at least that night. And you can't make your own. I mean, you could theoretically make your own matzah, but no one's making their own matzah. So matzah is the one thing we really need.
I mean, who can live without jelly candies, right?
Yeah.
My dentist could not live without my jelly candies.
A spokesperson for Sobeys told me they want to reassure their customers that they've been working closely with their suppliers to make sure there is, quote, ample inventory of products needed, unquote. But the official didn't say what, if anything, went wrong this year and what they were doing about it or when they would get matzah before next week. We also reached out to the Atlantic Superstore for comment, but they did not respond. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. Integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Today's listener shout-out goes to Mike Rabb of Boston. And we'll end with this new video from the Kashrut Council of Canada. They've put out a series of actually helpful short bits on frequently asked questions about Passover, like what coffee and tea is okay, and what about this orange juice? And here's my favorite, which laxatives are okay to use at Passover? Because we all know that eventually eating so much matzah messes with your digestion. We put the link to these videos in our show notes. Thanks for listening to the CJN Daily, and we'll be back on Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Rosen of COR. I'd like to discuss Kosher for Pesach laxatives. In our guide, we mentioned that Metamucil Original Course is acceptable for Pesach. The other varieties are not acceptable for Pesach because they have additional ingredients which are not acceptable for Pesach. In addition to Metamucil Original Course, there are other laxatives which are also acceptable for Pesach. Life Brand Fiber Laxative, which only has psyllium husks plus sugar, is acceptable for Pesach. Life Brand Clearly Fiber is also acceptable for Pesach because its ingredients are only chicory root inulin. Restoralax, whose only ingredient is PEG 3350, is acceptable for Pesach. If you come across a laxative and you would like to know if it's kosher for Pesach, take a picture of the ingredient panel and send it to us, and we will verify if it is kosher for Pesach.